Welcome to season 2 of the Best Hopes podcast. My name is Adam Frower.
I'm Cecil Walker.
And we are back to talk more about all things hope related. And we've been away for a while. We took quite a big break. And part of the purpose of that break was so that we could kind of really dig in and think about how do we want to make this useful for people going forward. And really, I think that break has been a really good thing for us because we've been able to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we want to move forward in this process. But now that we're back for episode 1 of season 2, Cecil, what are you hoping will come of all of this work that we've done?
Well, for season 2, I think I am hoping that we will find more ways to get kind of deeper into making this very functionally useful for people so that it feels like this is something tangible, something accessible, something people can really start to use in their lives and start to see it make a big difference. And I think even beyond that, I hope we can kind of start to really sink into how very practical and scientific this is, while also how meaningful and inspirational this can be. I hope we can start to really shine some light on, look at what this has done for people, look at what this has been shown to do, in a scientific way, and then maybe even tap into, so what does that mean for what it could do for anyone who might be listening to this?
Yeah, I really like that balance between kind of I like the word you use, one, a science of it all, and on the other side, kind of an inspiration of it all. I think that is a beautiful balance that we're trying to strike as we walk into season 2. The other thing that I was thinking as I was thinking about, how do I want this season to go? I think one of the things that I would say is I really hope that people can personalize this, they can individualize it. Last season of the podcast, we really took some time to kind of really extensively pull apart hope and lots of different aspects and components of hope. But it was all kind of a theoretical consideration at that point. And I hope that in this season, we can make it really applicable, really usable for people. I think the whole point of this process for us is to say, hopefully, talking about hope will change people, which will then change families, which will then change, cultures, and it just keeps getting bigger from there. And I think hope has such a powerful possibility of how much impact can be had.
Yeah, I think like a lot of psychological concepts and things that, people have come to understand as being very useful and good for people's well-being and for just all around finding satisfaction with their life and the things that you're doing. Like a lot of concepts relating to that, we kind of naturally do it. They can show up in very natural ways. But I think you're right. Through these conversations, we can start to really hone in on, well, how do I do this? How do I really find what is functional and what works well and what can serve me well? And how do I start to really enhance that and use that as best as I can? And maybe how do I even optimize? How do I have more hope and have that lead to more change and a change that I'm more satisfied with? All those kinds of things, rather than maybe not noticing or paying that much attention to hope at all, maybe not thinking that much about it or thinking that it has any type of effect at all. So hopefully we can push some of those things forward. Hopefully these conversations lead to kind of change we're talking about.
Yeah, and I want to kind of now make this first component of what we're talking about really overt, because you kind of highlighted it in what you just said, which is in this first episode, we really want to link hope with the possibility of change. We are psychotherapists. Lots of times people come in to see us, to talk with us and say, in some sense, I want something to be different. I want change to occur. And that very act of showing up, of thinking about it, of taking the first step of coming to a therapeutic encounter is just embedded. It's riddled with hope, right? I did a research to find this particular clinician. I cleared my schedule of other things to make sure that I could go to attend this appointment. I showed up in a really vulnerable way, just all hoping that something different could result from this process. And I think that psychotherapy experience is really just emblematic of lots of other things, other experiences, other moments that people have. I'm putting lots of pieces in place because I'm hoping for something to be different, for change to occur. And so if I ask you kind of this launching off question of, when you think about hope as it relates to change, how would you explain or describe the relationship between those two concepts?
I think they are, I don't know if this sounds bold, but kind of like unbreakingly connected, in that one leads to the other inherently, and that you can't have one without the other. And in my mind, I more specifically put the hope before the change, that hope leads to change, and that for a change to come about, there has to be at least some kernel of I want things to be different, or I have some type of desire or connection to if this were different in some kind of a way, I'd be more satisfied, or something like that. And I think that's why when you kind of really pay close attention, we've, I think, built a lot of our culture, our experiences, and media that we can consume. All these things are kind of built on this subtle understanding of hope that things can be different. We all invest a lot in education, that we can become some different kind of version of ourselves, some evolved, more educated, more capable version of ourselves. There's kind of this inherent understanding that with more experience, you'll be different. In every book and movie and song, there's like this, I want this thing, here's a problem, but I want some way around that problem, or I want a different experience from this problem. And then the story of that song or book or movie plays out in a way that you get that thing. And all of it seems to start with some premise of I want things to be different. And that's, to me, saying that any journey towards change starts with hope. And so anyone who wants change then needs hope. They're going to need some version of hope. And we spent the whole first season talking about different versions of hope. But I think it can show up in lots of different ways, obviously. But you do need it before you can get to that change. It's like, trying to get somewhere in your car is, well, if you're going to get somewhere, you're going to have some idea of, I'm here and I want to be over there. It's very basic, but functional in that kind of a way.
Yeah. One of the things that add a word to everything you said, because I think that you implied it without really saying it, which is purposeful change or meaningful change begins with hope.
Yeah.
Because I think on the one hand, like, change is always happening, right? Like,
yes.
Day is always turning into night. People are always getting older. They're like, change is happening. If the weather is getting warmer or colder, change is happening all the time. But I hear in what you're saying, like, if I choose, I can influence change.
Yeah.
And so I need to know what I'm hoping for in order to understand, how do I want to influence change? Now, some of those things, like day into night, I know I don't have any influence over. But if I take that idea of there's only a certain amount of daytime, how do I want to use that time meaningfully? And so then I begin to hope, well, I hope I can accomplish these things, or I hope that this thing happens during this particular day. Now I have some control over what occurs during the daylight hours that I do have. And so I think I like that idea of hope comes first, because it in essence says, it puts into perspective, what do I have influence over and what do I not have influence over? Hope can help us make that distinction and say, well, I could influence this, so I hope that I influence it in such and such a way. Does that ring true to what you were talking about?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. That's the perfect qualifier, actually, is you're right, that if there's a purposeful kind of change that you want, a specific kind of meaningful kind of change, then that's where this hope that we're talking about is the initiator for that, is a like a very necessary ingredient for that. Because you're right, you will end up with change regardless. Things will just be different. You're different over time. Your circumstances are different over time. Other factors revolving around you, the people, the places, the things at play, the processes, all of those things in some way or another change over time. And so it can either be change you wouldn't desire, or change that just isn't meaningful to you, isn't very significant, isn't change that you really pay that much attention to. Most of the time, things that we hope for, maybe even all the time, are things that are significant and or desirable to us. And so I think adding that qualifier of purpose, like kind of targeting that change, actually is really, really significant.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that comes to my mind as we think about this is it kind of begs the question of like, how do I know what my purpose is? How do I know what to hope for? How do I know where to put energy and effort into manipulating change or influencing change so that it moves me in a direction I want? And I think one of the things that then also requires is like forethought, self-examination, to say, what do I really value? What am I capable of? And I don't mean like, what am I currently capable of? Because I think hope in and of itself says, I could hope to become capable of more than I'm currently capable of. And hope, in fact, I think that's the kind of change where hope is really meaningful. Yeah. And so I think with hope, sometimes we think about hope or we talk about hope as just something that's like foundationless, right? Like I have this wishful thinking, or if all my dreams came true, this thing would happen. But I think when we connect it to change, then it becomes kind of anchored to, well, what do I value? Where do I want to put effort? Where is it worth trying to influence the change that happens? Because inherently, when we connect it to change, we've added, in some sense, resistance, because change is just inevitably happening, and I could just go along with whatever change is happening. But if I say I'm hoping for something different, then I've immediately put myself in a place of like pulling against the regular tide. So I've kind of said, I'm going to pull in this other direction, hoping that I can pull enough that I change the typical way of change. And so I think that really brings into the necessity of like, I have to know what I'm hoping for so that I know how much I need to pull, why I'm pulling in this particular direction, because I'm trying to do something different than what would just naturally occur.
Yeah, I think you're really getting into some of the meat there of that process of engaging in hope, because I do think you're right that it has to be attached to what is valuable to you, what's meaningful to you. It will inevitably say something about you, the things that you're hoping for, but you do have to invest that kind of intention and specificity into it to start to receive more out of it. And one of the things that I really like about hope, and I think is part of why we can have so many endless conversations about it, is it's something that maybe seems like is hard to access, or is somehow in some part gate kept from people in a broad kind of sense, like only certain kinds of people are allowed to have certain amounts of hope or something like that, or they're things not worth hoping for. I think that's a bit of an illusion, because I think we can and should hope for any of the things that we feel like we really need and really want, or really value, or connected to meaningful things about us, or things that are meaningful parts of who we are, and parts of things that we find significant. And I think in a really important way, it's free to do that, to hope for those things, to invest in that kind of a mental sense of, here's who I want to be, where I want to be, things I want to do, the impact I want to have, the achievements I want to live up to, the values I want to fulfill. Any versions of those are free to have, even if you feel like you have nothing. You know, it's not a financial investment in that. You got to bring something to get something out of it in the long run. I think all you got to bring really is that, like, that allowing yourself to hope for those things, and I guess I shouldn't make it feel like that is really easy either. That can be hard sometimes, but to bring yourself to the place of saying, I'm going to at least open my mind and maybe my heart or soul or something to this idea that things could be different in a way that I would be actually kind of pleased with. I'm going to open myself up to letting myself kind of dream about, well, if it went in the direction that I wanted, here's how I'd want it to be. Here's who I'd want to be. Here's how I'd want to interact with the things going on around me. I think that's the buy-in. That's the price. And that can seem steep, I suppose, for some people in some circumstances. But I think my general point is it's much more accessible than we maybe be led to believe if we're kind of afraid of approaching it in that kind of a way. And so I think in the end, the message is hope. You should do it. You should give that. You should buy into it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you referenced like literature and art and movies and all of that kind of stuff right at the beginning. And I think that story arc, right, is very relevant to what you're saying now, because there's almost like a dissatisfaction that occurs in the normal, that with the everyday, this status quo just isn't quite enough for me. I want something different than this. And then there's this dreaming of what could be out there, what could be different than this. And it's an unknown, but I think inherent in the dissatisfaction with the mundane, it tells you, I want to be different in some way. I think about a lot of those like Disney movies, right? Rapunzel is stuck in the tower, and after 18 years, she's saying to herself, like, I want something different than this one room.
Yeah.
And the thing that captures her attention is these lights in the sky. And just thinking, I want to understand what those are. I feel like there's something to these that I capture. You hear in Mulan, she's kind of torn between these two identities of like, I want to support my family. I want to do what's good for my family, but I want to bring my family honor. And there's one traditional way of bringing honor, of doing what she needs to do. And then there's this other way of, if I go against the grain, if I do something unusual, that would require change. It would require something. And in the Disney movie, she sings this whole song, like, when will my reflection show who I am? And I think that idea, we all have to get to this place of like, what I currently am and what I want to be, there's a difference there. And I want to influence the change. I want to move in this particular direction to become this kind of a person. There's hope embedded in that, but it also it's going to take work. It's going to take effort. You're going to go on this hero's journey in order to arrive at who you want to be. And I think embedded in all of like meaningful literature and art and all of those kinds of things, it is about what's the potential? Where could you arrive? Who could you become? And it always requires work. It always requires difficulty. It always requires some, let down in the middle. But then do you have enough hope to like pull yourself up to say, I'm still going to pursue this thing that's meaningful because my hope is going to carry me through.
Yeah, those examples I think are brilliant because you were kind of on this Disney theme, and I think Disney is really, really successful with their movies for some of these reasons, because they have that story down, because they speak to something very innately human where you can be up against a struggle or an inconvenience or difficulty. And it takes this really powerful wanting to kind of guide you out of that. And at the beginning of any movie, any story, any whatever, the hero, the protagonist, the person kind of feeling those wants and experiencing those difficulties, they don't have any idea about what's going to deliver them from that, what's going to bring them to the place that they want to be. Mulan said, I want to bring honor to my family. And at the beginning, the options kind of seemed pretty black and white. It was like, what's right in front of me. But that's not what brought honor to her family in the end. So she did get to the place she wanted to go. But the journey that got her there, it was riding on that hope without necessarily being this multiple choice test of what's the basic things right in front of you. Choose one of these other things and just go on with it. It was really still driven by that hope and by that purpose and intention, even as she kind of moved along. And I think that's what created more opportunities. That's what kind of showed more doors, more possibilities, and maybe even gave her a sense of the confidence to be able to choose some of those things. Since this is what I'm open for. This is what I was pointing my light on. And so if that door presents itself, if I see that as a possibility, I'm probably going to go take it. I'm probably going to go do it. I remember I think it was in the first season, we were talking about a similar kind of thing. And I remember I go on these like music rants about things that I don't know if they actually interest people or not, but they're fascinating to me. And Disney, like a lot of movies, musicals, anyone who makes use of song, they have to have that, what they call an I want song somewhere in the beginning. Sometimes they'll have even more than one, but it's very much a like declaration of here's who I want to be. Here's the place I want to get to. Here's how what I want to accomplish. And almost always they never are about the like, this is your blueprint to get to where you want to go to. Just like I don't think hoping for something needs to be specifically a write down a list of all the specific things you're going to do to get that thing. Planning could very well be part of the process for people. But I think what's really meaningful in this conversation is that it's the purposeful intention of I want to be in a different place. And that's what pulls you. That's what guides you. That's what shows you the possibilities and kind of starts to redirect your story. That, I mean, it's like in The Little Mermaid. If she didn't say, I want to be on land, I want to be where the people are, I want like that kind of a life, would she have accepted the things that would have gotten her to that place? She had never even stopped to think of, I don't want to be here. How do you make a deal that gets you somewhere else if you're not even thinking about, I want to be somewhere else? So I think all those examples, just like you were saying, do really reveal a lot about how powerful hope can be, but also how it doesn't need to really be a calculus to it. I think it doesn't have to be, Rapunzel's stars didn't need to, even if they were nothing, they meant nothing, but they somehow just were a symbol to her that there was something out there and she could be out there. She could have very well turned out to not be royalty. I think that still would have been progress in her story.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was also thinking sometimes we think that hope is just like the thing that will pull us to where we want it to be. But I think sometimes if we think about kind of going against the natural trend of change, I was thinking as well in To Kill a Mockingbird, there's all this like just momentum of let's keep society the same. Let's treat people the way we've always treated people. And one of the main characters, Atticus, who's the dad, is like firmly trying to stand like, this is what I think, this is what I believe. And he's trying in some sense not to be moved from that place. And I think sometimes when we think, oh, I want to be this kind of a person, there might actually be part of that already with us. And we don't necessarily have to seek change, but the hope might be that I can resist change from outside forces. And I think sometimes we think I'm not good enough the way that I am, or I'm not capable enough the way that I am. And I think lots of people fall into, I just want to be different than I am. And again, I think if we're really going to value hope, with this personal assessment of what do I value? What am I really aiming for? What am I really hoping for? There might be pieces too that we need to keep the same, where we need to say, I'm going to hold true to this, even though everything around me is kind of pulling me to think something different or believe something different or behave some way differently. I think Atticus is like that really good example of like, I'm going to hold firm to an idea that I have that is different than what the bulk of society is saying at this time. But if I can hold true to it, maybe society will bend to me and start seeing the way I see things, and change will happen not because I changed or moved, but because people changed and moved to get closer to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I guess it can almost sound kind of spiritual. Like that change coming doesn't necessarily have to come in the way you might specifically think that it will, or that seems most obvious. It could very well come in lots of different ways. And you could end up satisfied with, here's the place that I am, or here's the outcome, even though, you didn't get the $1 million, or, whatever circumstance that you were hoping would be flipped in the way that you specifically want it to be. Again, I don't think that those specifics are the necessary part of it. In the same way that in therapy, when people come and they say, I want to be happy, I want my marriage problems to be resolved or something like that. When there's this like specific strategy that people have, it ends up in the end not really mattering about the strategy, whatever very, very, bare bones specific thing that they really want. They can still get the outcome that they're desiring. They can still get the happiness, the relief from depression, the peace that they're looking for. And sometimes that looks really, really different for different people. Sometimes that means divorce, and that's how you get the peace and the happiness. Sometimes that does mean, people come together and understand, your significant other or people in your family suddenly change and they see the light somehow, and now they're different. And so you're happier now. I can guarantee that's not how it always plays out. But, it doesn't matter. The actual specific mechanics of it doesn't have to move according to this, preconceived notion of here's how it's supposed to go. It could move in lots of different ways that still get you there. And that's the whole point, is that what you're hoping for can grow some possibilities of really what it really means and what it looks like to get to this kind of a destination. And so you should probably be very okay with, I can't see the path to that yet, and I'm still going to hope for it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like this idea of I can purposely influence change, whether that means I personally change or whether that means I can influence others to change to where I am. But all of that change being kind of founded on, I'm hoping for something in particular. I'm hoping to be a particular kind of person. I'm hoping to live in a particular kind of a society. I'm purposely aligning my hope with the change that I'm hoping to achieve. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we get into this first episode?
No, not on this first one, because I think we're gonna do all some deep digging into these things as we move along. So don't want to spoil it all.
Well, hopefully that was a useful conversation for you about change, about really being purposeful, intentional about how you unite your hope with the change that you're hoping to achieve. If you know of other people who would benefit from kind of thinking about hope in this way, please share this podcast with them. It would mean a lot to us. But until next time, be purposeful about the way you use hope to achieve change.